Their lives collided in a courtroom where fame, power, and exploitation unraveled in real time. What began as whispers behind velvet ropes exploded into a federal trial that exposed a hidden world few dared to imagine until now. When federal agents descended on a sprawling Miami mansion in the early hours of January 4, 2025, few could have predicted the media firestorm that would follow. The property, tucked behind palm-lined gates and guarded like a fortress, was not just another celebrity home. It belonged to Sean P. Diddy Combs, the iconic music mogul who had helped shape the sound of an entire generation. But what agents claimed to find behind those polished doors was far more sinister than the public could have imagined. Inside, investigators uncovered a labyrinth of luxury and secrecy. Hidden passageways, biometric locks, and an underground room equipped with surveillance monitors raised immediate suspicions. What was initially considered a routine federal inspection tied to a financial probe quickly spiraled into a far-reaching investigation into alleged sex trafficking, coercion, and abuse of power. According to federal documents later unsealed, Combs was accused of orchestrating a long-running operation that exploited aspiring models, dancers, and singers, all under the promise of fame and stardom. The prosecution's early reports painted a disturbing picture. Young women, many of them barely out of their teens, were allegedly recruited through social media, industry events, and word of mouth. Once inside Combs' inner circle, the women were offered contracts, appearances, and access to high-profile parties. But those promises soon gave way to control. Prosecutors said that passports were confiscated, contact with family was restricted, and non-disclosure agreements were forced upon them under duress. For some, the parties were the last stop before they vanished from the public eye entirely. Public reaction was swift and divided. Fans and celebrities flooded social media with support, arguing that the accusations were exaggerated or fabricated. Others pointed to a long trail of controversies and whispered rumors surrounding the music mogul, claims that had never quite reached the surface until now. Overnight, the story shifted from celebrity gossip to a full-scale legal and cultural reckoning. The courtroom became the center of a national spectacle. Every day brought new revelations, new names, and new questions. How deep did the operation go? Who else was involved? And how had it stayed hidden for so long? While many had seen Combs as untouchable, the trial revealed cracks in the foundation of his empire, cracks that had been forming for years, silently expanding beneath the surface of fame and fortune. As day one of the trial unfolded, it became clear that this was not just a case about one man. It was about an entire system that allowed power to silence victims, and about whether that system was finally about to break. By the fifth day of the trial, tension inside the courtroom had reached a fever pitch. Spectators, reporters, and online viewers had spent days listening to chilling testimonies and carefully orchestrated arguments from both sides, but nothing prepared anyone for what happened when the prosecution announced their next witness. The courtroom doors swung open and in walked Crystal Monroe, her presence sending an audible gasp through the room. Once a rising star in the early 2010s, she had vanished from the music scene without explanation. Now, she returned not as a performer, but as the government's star witness. Crystal's story was more than just a personal tragedy. It was a roadmap into the alleged inner workings of Combs' hidden empire. She testified that she met Combs at the age of 19 during a label showcase in New York City. Flattered by the attention and thrilled at the opportunity to sign with his label, she agreed without hesitation. What followed, she claimed, was a descent into a world she never imagined. Within months of joining the label, Crystal said she was pressured into attending exclusive parties hosted at Combs' estates in Los Angeles, Miami, and the Caribbean. These events, which were sold as networking opportunities, quickly revealed their darker side. Crystal described being handed drinks laced with substances she hadn't agreed to take, and being isolated from her management team and family. She spoke of assistants who monitored her movements, confiscated her phone, and kept her under constant surveillance. She detailed a life that looked glamorous from the outside but felt like a prison from the inside. According to her testimony, the parties were fronts for exploitation, where young women were handed off to powerful guests, including athletes, politicians, and industry executives. Some of them, she claimed, were later paid to stay quiet or simply disappeared. Crystal said she tried to escape multiple times, but was met with threats, intimidation, and legal traps buried in contracts she had never fully understood. The most devastating moment came when Crystal presented a collection of videos and audio recordings she had secretly saved. One clip showed her visibly dazed, sitting on a sofa surrounded by unfamiliar men while music blasted in the background. Another recording captured a phone call in which a handler threatened her with legal action and ruined opportunities if she ever spoke publicly. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Her testimony not only gave voice to the victims who could no longer speak, but it also cracked the public image of Combs that had been carefully crafted over decades. For the first time, the jury and the world saw something they couldn't ignore: the possible truth behind the fame. On the ninth day of the trial, the prosecution introduced a witness who had never been mentioned in pre-trial documents, catching both the defense and media off guard. Luis Ortega, a quiet, middle-aged man in a modest suit, walked to the stand with the slow, hesitant steps of someone carrying a heavy burden. His face was unfamiliar to the public, but his role in the case would soon prove pivotal. For 15 years, Ortega had been Sean Combs' personal driver, a job that placed him at the center of events few others ever witnessed. Ortega began by explaining how he started working for Combs through a security contracting firm in 2010. At first, the job seemed routine, driving the artist between recording sessions, parties, and industry meetings. But over time, his assignments changed. He was told not to speak, not to ask questions, and not to look back. The rules were clear, and the money was good. He stayed silent until guilt forced him to break it. He recounted numerous late-night trips to private airstrips, luxury hotels, and remote rental properties that weren't listed under Combs' name. Ortega remembered driving young women, often quiet, anxious, or visibly shaken, from lavish parties to locations that didn't match their expectations. He described how they were picked up from high-end modeling agencies or private auditions, only to be delivered into a world they hadn't agreed to enter. Ortega never heard cries for help, but he saw what he called silent fear in their eyes. One night in 2023, everything changed. Ortega picked up a girl from a party in the Hollywood Hills. She looked disoriented, mascara streaked down her face. As he drove her to a gated estate in Calabasas, he overheard her whispering into a hidden phone, "They won't let me leave. Please, tell my sister." The next day, she was gone. No follow-up ride. No return call. Ortega never saw her again. He tried to report the incident anonymously. Days later, he was abducted by masked men, beaten, and dumped in an abandoned warehouse outside Atlanta. The message was clear: keep quiet. For months, he did. But when his son died from a fentanyl overdose later that year, Ortega said he couldn't carry the weight any longer. He came forward, offering GPS records, calendar logs, and detailed descriptions of events spanning years. His testimony was calm but devastating. Every word painted a picture of a system where luxury cars and velvet ropes concealed something darker. For the first time, someone from inside the logistics of Combs' life was connecting dots the public never knew existed. And those dots were starting to form a pattern impossible to ignore. On the 11th day of the trial, the prosecution revealed what would become the most explosive development in the case: a hidden surveillance vault discovered beneath Sean Combs' Los Angeles estate. Described by FBI agents as the nerve center of the operation, the vault had been located behind a false wall in the basement, accessible only through biometric verification. Inside, investigators found racks of servers, time-stamped recordings, and hundreds of labeled hard drives dating back nearly 20 years. The courtroom braced itself as agents began to explain what the vault contained. According to the FBI's forensic team, the surveillance network covered nearly every room in Combs' properties, from bedrooms and lounges to outdoor pool areas and even vehicles. None of the cameras were visible to the average eye, concealed inside smoke detectors, light fixtures, and decorative mirrors. What made the discovery even more disturbing was the nature of the footage. The recordings weren't just security tapes. They were detailed, organized, and stored meticulously as if curated for future use. Agents testified that many of the videos captured explicit encounters, private conversations, and vulnerable moments involving women, guests, and even fellow celebrities. The implication was chilling, that Combs had used the footage as leverage, perhaps as blackmail, or to keep associates and victims compliant. The vault also contained signed non-disclosure agreements, all scanned and cataloged alongside corresponding videos, suggesting a deliberate effort to control the narrative and silence dissent. But the most damning piece of evidence came in the form of a red-labeled hard drive marked 2019 confidential. When decrypted, it revealed 5 minutes of footage recorded during a party at Combs' Beverly Hills residence. In the video, a young girl, visibly intoxicated and disoriented, is seen being escorted upstairs by 2 unidentified men. Moments later, a well-known political aide appears on camera. The girl's identity was confirmed as someone who had gone missing later that same year, her disappearance remaining unsolved until now. The courtroom was stunned into silence. Federal agents also discovered folders labeled with names of individuals who had been rumored to have fallen out with Combs or distanced themselves from his circle. Each folder contained edited video clips, transaction records, and in some cases, threatening messages saved from burner phones. It painted a picture of a man not just concerned with image and power but obsessed with control. As prosecutors presented the evidence, it became clear that the case was no longer limited to allegations of trafficking. The surveillance vault shifted the narrative to something broader and more frightening: a calculated system of exploitation, blackmail, and manipulation built over decades and hidden behind a world of fame, wealth, and influence. On the 12th day of the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom felt different, charged with anticipation, as if everyone sensed they were nearing the heart of something far greater than what the initial charges had suggested. Cameras outside the courthouse rolled continuously, capturing the procession of attorneys, federal agents, and observers who now realized they were witnessing not just a celebrity trial, but the potential unraveling of a vast, hidden network. Inside, the defense launched its most aggressive pushback yet. They argued that the surveillance footage was taken out of context, that it was selectively edited, and that many of the witnesses had motives rooted in financial gain or personal resentment. They claimed Crystal Monroe's testimony was emotionally compelling but unreliable, pointing to her past struggles with substance abuse and mental health. They painted Luis Ortega as a disgruntled employee seeking attention and revenge. The defense insisted there was no vault of secrets, just a paranoid celebrity concerned with security. But the prosecution countered with a move no one expected. They announced the existence of sealed indictments connected to evidence uncovered during the raid, names not yet made public, but belonging to individuals tied to politics, entertainment, and corporate finance. It sent a wave of anxiety through the courtroom, whispers of who's next circulated both in the press and among onlookers. This wasn't just about Combs anymore. It had grown into a multi-branch investigation. Adding to the pressure, 2 former associates of Combs, previously uncooperative, had now agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. They were set to appear in the coming days, claiming they had been part of the operation, recruited to manage logistics, procure drugs, and enforce silence through intimidation. One had already provided a map of properties believed to contain additional evidence, including a private yacht now being held in the Caribbean. As the day progressed, federal agents testified about encrypted communications between Combs and known facilitators. Texts and emails hinted at coordination, asset movement, and payment schedules, often masked behind vague event planning language. The jury sat through it all, faces rigid, trying to absorb the full scope of what they were hearing. Combs remained expressionless throughout, seated beside his legal team, flanked by bodyguards who now looked more ceremonial than protective. His empire was no longer just under scrutiny, it was cracking in real time. When court adjourned that evening, the world watched the courtroom door swing open, waiting to see what would come next. Day 13 promised more revelations, but after today, one truth was undeniable: this case had become a reckoning, and the fall of one icon might only be the beginning.